Hi, my name is Terry Viola Wilson. I'm Program Manager for Home Hospice Association's Candy Cafe program. CANDY stands for Creating Awareness and Normalizing Death for Youth. I've been asked to create this PowerPoint for you because in your line of work, you may find that people tap into you to help them communicate with the young people in the family about a death that is either imminent or has taken place. I hope that by the end of this PowerPoint, you feel more confident in doing that. The expectation, however, is not that you will actually ever be the one to deliver the sad news to a young child. It should always be the person closest to the child who does this. It's okay if that person sharing the news is sad or crying, but they should not be so overwhelmed that they don't have control over their emotions. That could alarm a child even more in an already scary and difficult situation. If the grieving parent is too upset to deliver the news somewhat calmly, then it should go to the next closest person to the child who breaks the news. Resilience. Resilience is the capacity to adapt, transform, recover after a stressor. Rami Shami, a multicultural outreach coordinator with Lighthouse, a peer support group for grieving children and families in Oakville, Ontario, said at the 2020 Children's Grief Symposium, how a person experiences an event determines if it is traumatic. I'm sure we've all heard people say that children are resilient. Children are not resilient, so that is incorrect. Children learn to be resilient by how they are raised, how they develop self-confidence, self-esteem, how they feel about themselves within, and also by the external support mechanisms that are in their life. For example, a school where they feel comfortable, or teams that they're a part of, organizations, whether they have access to support at times when they need it. It's important to explain to adults that children are not fine, they will not be okay because they won't remember what they're going through anyways, or because they're resilient. It's important that adults understand that it's up to them to help the child cope and learn how to deal with what life throws at them, including the death of a loved one. Psychiatrists and therapists have generally been struck by how often major childhood loss seems to result in psychopathology. Studies of adults with various mental disorders, especially depression, frequently reveal childhood bereavement, suggesting that such loss may precipitate or contribute to the development of a variety of psychiatric disorders, and that this experience can render a person emotionally vulnerable for life. This special vulnerability of children is attributed to their developmental immaturity and insufficiently developed coping capacities. So the death itself alone is not what determines how a child comes out of the experience. What determines how the child ends up as an adult is how the adults in their life, when the death occurred, helped them cope. As with adults, children benefit by having their grief reactions normalized and validated. Adults can play a pivotal role in assisting grieving children with understanding that their grief can be a healthy process, just like it is with adults. It can alleviate the pain they are experiencing. Children can also be taught life-enhancing methods to help them cope with the loss. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the brain develops. For our purposes, we're going to talk about three parts of the brain: the brainstem, the limbic system, and the neocortex. The brainstem is sometimes referred to as a lizard brain because they have the same as us. This is the fight, flight, freeze, faint response center. It's important to us when we perceive danger. This is developed in utero. This is also the part of the brain that controls involuntary body functions like breathing, heart rate, digestion. The next part of the brain to develop is the limbic system. This is where our emotions and feelings come from. We also store a certain type of memory here. The example I'll give you is a child who touches something hot like a fireplace. They go through the pain. After that, they will associate the fireplace with pain. And in a similar way, if they eat something and they really like it, they will associate that food with pleasure. The last part of the brain to develop is the neocortex. This is the thinking part of the brain. This is where we do our organizing, our reasoning. It's the logic part. It's the part that regulates emotions. So that 3-year-old who's throwing a temper tantrum in the store with the parent who is trying to reason with them and explain to them why this is not a good choice doesn't care what the parent is saying because they don't understand. They do not have the reasoning capacity. So I shouldn't say they don't care. They don't have the capability of caring about that. But the important thing is that if the adult knows that there's no point in reasoning because the child is incapable of it, they won't waste their breath. And they won't get frustrated when the child doesn't understand their reasoning process. Also important to note is that the limbic system during the teen years goes through more changes. So it results in more risky behavior during the teen years because of other things that are happening with hormones and the neocortex. The neocortex does not finish developing until the late 20s or early 30s. So now looking at developmental stages. From infancy to 3 years old, the loss of the primary caregiver can have serious adverse effects on a child. Some people actually think that during this stage of life, children won't remember what happened, so it won't bother them. Not true. Losing the care of a primary caregiver can lead to attachment disorders and can affect social, emotional, and cognitive development in children. They're very sensitive to their environment. And though they cannot necessarily express themselves and tell you that they miss the person, they will let adults know by crying, by possibly regressing. So, for example, a 3-year-old who has been trained to go to the bathroom will begin to wet their pants or perhaps wet the bed at night. They can regress in terms of throwing temper tantrums, though 3-year-olds can still throw temper tantrums without anything wrong in their life. But they are very sensitive, and so it's really important that others provide consistent caregiving with lots of extra attention, with snuggling and sticking to routines as much as possible, engaging with the children in activities that they enjoy. And if they have any questions, of course, to answer them, but with very simple explanations. From 4 to 5 years old, children are very concrete in their thinking and their understanding of the world. They can't grasp the concept of death. They believe the person will come back, even after they have been told that the person has died and they're gone. These children may ask, well, will they be here on Saturday for movies and popcorn? Or, yeah, but he'll be here for my birthday, right? We have to keep our explanations simple and honest, and we may have to repeat them. Given their self-centeredness, that is, that because of their age, their world is the immediate world around them. They may think that they are the cause of the illness or death, why the person isn't around anymore. So they need a lot of reassurances that they are in no way to blame. From 6 to 9 years old, children may express an interest in what happens to the body at death. They don't mean this to be rude. They're starting to relate to the world around them in a scientific way. At this point, they know things like flowers die, and they've seen that happen. Maybe they've seen a dead animal on the road when they're walking along the sidewalk, and they see what it looks like. So they might ask questions like that. At the same time, they have magical thinking. They believe that the person can come back, maybe if they really, really wish hard, or maybe they believe that if they could tap into magic somehow, they can bring the person back. We need to keep our explanations with them very simple, and they can be told what to expect will happen. They understand stages and steps that occur. They also can participate in figuring out how they will fit in with the commemoration of the person who died. From 9 to 12 years old, they understand the universality and finality of death, and the explanations can be a little more detailed, but still in simple terms. They can be very self-conscious as they enter puberty, and this can become amplified by the death of a loved one. So this is the thinking of, I don't want to be the girl whose brother died, or I don't want to be the boy whose dad died. They need to be reassured that the people who know them know that they are more than that, and what their qualities are that people know about them. From 13 to 19 years old, they're capable of understanding what is going on and what will happen. They're very concerned about what the death means in their life moving forward. I'll give you an example of this from when our son was a competitive dancer. There was a teenage girl whose mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she was told it was stage 4. She would not be surviving. This young lady's reaction was, then who's going to do my hair and makeup for dance competitions? That appeared to be a very selfish reaction. But if we think about the fact that her mother had been there since she was a very little girl and started in competitive dance, even for dance recitals, her mother was the one who always did her makeup and hair. It was routine. It was familiar. It was secure. While she expressed herself in what appeared to be a selfish way, what she was really worried about was how she could possibly compete ever again if it wasn't her mother doing her makeup and her hair. This came out in her lack of interest in going to any more dance practices, her expression of no desire to go into any more competitions. When she was reassured by the other moms who had known her since she was very little that they would do her hair and makeup, she still didn't want to compete. So you can see what she really meant was, how am I ever going to compete again if my mom isn't here? So just like us adults, sometimes we say things in different ways from what we really mean. We can understand, especially when you think back to the brain development, how it's really hard for young people to say what they're really concerned about because they may not even realize what's really bothering them. Ultimately, she was convinced to carry on competing because it's what her mom would want her to do. And she went on to do very well in dance competitions and dance with her whole heart. At this age, they may feel responsible for the death of their loved one, and therefore they need reassurances, and they will go through multiple emotions. Because don't forget, 13 to 19 years old is about hormones to a great extent. When we talk about children and grief, or children and when someone is dying, there are 5 questions that are common, known as the 5 C's. The first one is, did I cause this? And we've talked about how children really understand their world immediately around them and how everything connects to them. So believing that they must somehow have created this situation is understandable, but they need to be reassured that absolutely they did not, even if they don't raise the question. The second question is, can I catch it? Of course, if the situation is something like COVID, then children need to understand that, yes, it is something that other people can catch. However, we know that you're okay, or we're all going to get tested. But in most cases, the child can be reassured that what the person is dying from is not something that they can catch. For example, cancer or heart disease, diabetes. Could I have cured them? This is a question that even adults ask. And this is the sense of if only I could, if only I had realized that they were sick and made them go to the doctor. So again, children need to be reassured that they are not in a position to cure someone else. Who will take care of me is a really important question to address with young people, especially if the person who is dying or has died is their caretaker, their caregiver. So it's important that they be reminded that there are other people who love them very much and that they are front and center in terms of planning ahead. But I just want to put to you, imagine if you're an immigrant family and an adult is dying. The child will not feel so secure because they may not have extended family in this country if they've come over and no other family members have come. So the living parent has a lot to accomplish in terms of reassuring the child that they're going to do everything they can to stay healthy and to not leave them. How do I stay connected to them once they're gone? And this is, again, something that even adults wonder. So there are a lot of activities that kids can do, things that they can do that can be accessed online. Things like photo albums or creating a shadow box of things that were important to that person, or maybe things that they gave the child when they were alive. A lot of great ideas available online that you can refer the parents to. Before talking with a young person, it's important to think about a few things. First of all, consider their developmental stage, which we've already talked about. Secondly, make sure all the adults involved in the child's life are on the same page. This includes teachers, coaches, instructors, other family members, whoever's going to be in touch with a child. They need to know what the child has and has not been told about. Imagine if someone asks a child, will you be helping to pick out the music for your mother's funeral? I know she wanted you to. And they haven't been told yet that their mother is actually going to die. As the information to the child changes, it's important that that be shared with the other people who are in their life. Give thought to whether the child is an approacher or an avoider. Interesting to think about this regarding ourselves as well. An approacher is someone who says, I want all the information I need in order to prepare for what's coming. An avoider says, well, thank you for what you've told me so far. I need to go and do something else right now because that's enough talking about that for now. They look for distractions. There is no right or wrong here. We simply are who we are given certain circumstances. The interesting thing that happens, though, is when the adult is one and the teen or the child is another. For example, if you have an approacher adult who says, I'm going to give my child all this information which is really going to help them prepare for what's coming. But the child is an avoider. And as soon as they hear that something is wrong, that's it. They want to go shoot hoops. Go listen to music. The adult can become frustrated because they can take that as the child saying, I'm not interested, or they become frustrated because they really believe that the child needs as much information as possible to be able to cope. So there can be conflict. Same with the reverse situation. If the child is an approacher and says, I want all the information that I can get right now, I need it all so that I know exactly what to expect and I will prepare myself. But the adult is an avoider and they really don't want to get into a lengthy conversation right then. Again, it's not that one is right and the other is wrong. It's a matter of figuring out how to work it out so that everyone feels comfortable with how it's being handled. Give thought to the questions they may ask specific to themselves. If a loved one in a young person's life is dying or has died, it affects them. They know it does. They understand at certain ages, they understand that it is going to change how their life works moving forward. So the adult who's going to talk to them needs to understand that there are certain questions they can prepare for. Will the child be concerned about how they get to practices? Will the child be concerned about what this does in terms of their graduation coming up? Also, the adult needs to prepare for the questions they don't have answers to and to admit it and say, I don't know yet, but I'm working on it. Think about where to have the conversation. Will it be on a walk through a park? Is it going to be in the backyard on the swings, in the basement in front of the fireplace? Is there something they could be doing while they're having this conversation? If it's a little one, maybe coloring, maybe listening to music that the young person really likes, playing quietly in the background, or while you're playing cards. Those things are okay to do. So how to have the actual conversation with the young person? Start off with what they know. So the adult who's talking to them should be asking them, you know, Grandpa has been diagnosed with cancer. Can you explain to me what that's meant to you up till now? Or Dad's been in the hospital for a while. What's actually going on in your mind about that? What do you understand about that? Explain what death means. This is really hard for a lot of adults to explain what death is. It comes down to simple facts. The heart stops beating, the lungs stop taking in oxygen, and so the person isn't breathing anymore. They don't feel anything anymore, including pain, and they don't come back. Choose comforting words. So the adult needs to reassure them that the relationship they had with the person was a good one. And, you know, remember when you used to play together in the driveway? They loved that. Or Grandpa loved it when you used to play cards with him. They loved you, or they knew that you loved them. Whatever puts them at ease with the relationship and reassures them that it was good. Giving them time to process is important. Even if the child does not ask for a break, we need to, as the adults we need to say, you know, that's good for now. How about we go and get a snack? Or do you want to go and do something else for a little while? We can always talk about this again. Encourage them to ask questions. Don't judge the questions that they ask. If they ask a question over again that's already been explained, we have to be patient, explain it again, or even say, what do you remember from when you asked that before? And then maybe I can help out with what you've forgotten. But it's really important to accept what they ask. And then explain what's next. So if the next thing that's going to happen is a funeral, talk about it. If the next thing that's going to happen is the person is going to come home to die, explain that's what's going to happen next. Throughout interaction with the child or teen, listen and watch, then respond. So as much as the parents in the child's life may want to prepare a script almost, it's really important that they not do that, that they listen to what the child says, look at the child's facial expressions, their body language, and respond to that. Take their cues from the child. Expect and accept reactions. All reactions are correct reactions because they're coming from the child. Whether the child is angry, whether the child is crying, whether they seem to have no reaction at all externally, they're all okay, unless they are harmful to themselves or others. When talking about death, it's really important that we be aware of euphemisms. So there are approximately 200 euphemisms used related to the concept of dying and death. And I'm sure that we can all think of some humorous ones like kick the bucket or pushing up daisies, 6 feet under. The thing is, with children, people tend to use phrases like going to a better place. Oh, the Dairy Queen? Can I go? Or passed on. What does that mean? Passed on what? Went to be with Grandpa, or went to be with Aunt Ethel. Can I go too? So these are confusing terms. The best thing to do is use the actual language. Avoid using euphemisms. Interacting with young people around serious illness and death. If the child is young, let them be little. Let them be young. Let them play and do the things that they would normally do. Let them express themselves, especially in creative ways. In fact, encourage it. Creating pictures, writing poetry, writing music, anything that gets their creative juices flowing. If they're so inclined, encourage them to do that. Never be afraid to cry in front of them. It's important to pass that on to the adults in a child's life. It teaches them that it's okay to cry. A very important lesson in life. Include them in decisions that affect them. Do they want to be a part of what is happening? Do they want to read a poem at the celebration of life? Do they want to pick the flowers that will be put on the gravesite? What are they thinking in terms of how they can be involved? Include them in how to remember. So what should we do? Do you think that we should have photographs? What about some of their favorite things? Would you like to write a poem? When someone is seriously ill or dying, it's important to be honest and open with young people at an age-appropriate level. Be prepared to talk in stages. If the person who's dying is dying in stages, then to inform the young person about what's going on as well as what will happen next is a good way to approach it, rather than telling them everything that's going to happen. It's also important that the adults in the child's life do normal things as much as possible. So, for example, if the fence needs repairing, repair the fence if they can. If they normally watch a certain TV show, then watch the TV show. It tells young people that not everything in their life is unstable. It gives them permission to still do normal things themselves. For example, if the adults stop doing normal things, but they tell the child, no, you're going to go to soccer practice, or you're going to go to school every day, you're going to do normal things. We aren't, but you are. That's difficult for a child to work out. Also, doing normal things gives the adults a chance to focus on something else for a little while. Allow young people to participate in mourning, whatever that means for their culture or faith. It teaches them that we honor and respect a person's legacy and what they mean to us. It's important that adults not hide their feelings in an effort to protect a child's feelings. All that tells them is that they can't come to us with their emotions and questions. Be prepared that they won't react to our chats the way that we expect them to necessarily. If it isn't harmful, we need to accept it. Make sure that they know that they can go to the adults anytime they need to, and that the adults know to check in with the young people, how they're feeling and their emotions regularly. I'm going to talk a little bit now about medical assistance in dying. I give credit for this section to Nikki Seligman. She's a counselor at Heart House. I attended one of her webinars and I learned an awful lot about how to talk to young people about MAID. An important thing that everyone has to understand about MAID is that the person who is accessing medical assistance in dying isn't choosing death over life. They are already dying. They're choosing how they die because what lays ahead of them is not the kind of death that they want. MAID offers them a more peaceful death than the one they are facing. Once again, we come back to the idea that we have to find out what a child knows. So adults may think they know what a child knows, but they don't really know until they ask them what they know. And we certainly don't know what they're thinking. Adults believe that if they've told a child something, the child knows it. And yet children forget, or they may nod their head but haven't got a clue what's just been told to them. We never know when a child has heard half of a conversation because someone was on the phone. That can lead to confusion, misinformation, or if they've heard a conversation from another room. So the important place to start, even with MAID, is to find out what they know. So what happens when not all the adults in the family agree with a person's option to access MAID? And that can happen very easily, whether it's on religious grounds, maybe they can't let go and they don't want the person to die earlier than nature deems they should die. It's important to decide beforehand how the family wants to cope with their differences of opinion. Legal guardians of a child have the right to share their points of view with the child, but no one else really has that right unless given to them by the legal guardians. When legal guardians disagree, for the sake of the child and their mental health, they need to be calm, unified, and hopefully come to accept that ultimately what's important is the wish of the person who is dying. When talking with a young person about someone's choice to access MAID, now we're going to find out what do they know about MAID and listen to the response and go from there. Participation. Will the child or teen be present when MAID is accessed? So the first step is, what does the person who is dying want? And then what does the child want? It's very important that the child know that whatever decision, for example, if they decide that they want to be in the room when MAID is accessed, that they be told ahead of time that they can change their mind right up to the last minute. If they feel uncomfortable, they can absolutely leave. If they're going to choose not to be in the room, in order to be able to change their mind at the last minute, they're going to have to be very close by. And again, it's up to the person who is dying whether or not they want that child to be disrupting the process when it's close to the time. So all that has to be considered when children are involved. The child can be present but otherwise occupied. In the case of little children, they may be coloring, they may be looking at a favorite book, or quietly playing in the corner. Maybe the sound of that will be comforting for the person who is dying and accessing MAID. Children who have gone through the MAID process have given the advice that you see in blue to other children. And they are, so say I love you as much as you want, and you don't have to say goodbye. Before MAID is accessed, it's important to go over with a child what they are going to hear, see, smell, potential emotions, and what will happen after the person dies. So the adult who is talking with the child needs to be clear on those things before they have the conversation. If the young person doesn't want to be present at the time when MAID is accessed, where do they want to be? If they don't want to be there, would they like to help decorate the room? Would they like to make something that the person who is accessing MAID can have with them, maybe even take with them or have with them after they die? If they can't be there, but they want to be, then perhaps they could be FaceTiming or using a platform like Zoom, or they might want to write a letter that is read to the person before they die. And the final point to consider when talking about MAID is how the young person will deal with anyone who expresses to them that the person should not have accessed MAID. So we're going to help them develop language to comfortably respond to negative reactions. Adults can use this too. Is to acknowledge that there are different opinions, but the only one that mattered was that of the person who was dying. And so the young person can learn to say, it's what my Nana wanted, and that's what matters. Thank you so much for your attention. If you ever want to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. You can reach me at terry@homehospiceassociation.com. Best wishes on your case study. Take care.